production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Strickland's second term, the impact of the sales tax referendum, and more election outcomes tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by a couple of journalists to talk about the election outcomes. Karanja Janaku, editor, New Tri-State Defender. Thanks for being here again.
My pleasure.
And Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian, who I believe went to bed about 2 hours ago, if I'm not mistaken, as we tape this Friday morning. So obviously we will start with, I think, the mayor's race. It wasn't even close, Bill, not at all.
Yeah, this is what you would call an out-of-the-box victory. As soon as the early votes came in and the incumbent Jim Strickland racked up 33,000 votes there in the early vote. This is out of an early vote turnout of approximately 52,000. He got 33,000 votes out of that. It was over.
Yeah, and we have the numbers of Karanja. I mean, your thoughts? He beat Willie Harrington 2-1. That I think surprised me on some level, but even more surprising for me was that he beat Tammy Sawyer, the county commissioner, almost 10-1. She was barely at just 6,500, 6,600 votes. He was at 60,000 votes, give or take. Your thoughts on the overall outcome and so on?
I didn't find it as surprising as you did. I mean, voters obviously decided to keep going with the status quo. And how you view that status quo is how they pull the lever there. I mean, I think when you look at the mayor's race and you even look down through the city council, yeah, record matters, but resources matter. Incumbency matters. And Strickland did a really good job, it seems to me, just being the mayor, particularly down toward the end, being at these places where you're not necessarily campaigning, but you're being the mayor. And I think that those kinds of things work well for him.
I think one of the things that was interesting, I think we talked about on the show, and I know I talked about with other people, is over the last year, and I don't mean this cynically, but when you talk about being the mayor, I mean a whole lot, maybe it's over the last couple of years, a lot of these tax incentive programs, just one example maybe of what you're talking about, and if not, you'll tell me. One example to me would be that the tax incentive programs that over the years so often were big projects, the FedEx Forum, Bass Pro, or downtown projects or maybe midtown projects, that the Strickland administration made a very concerted effort to get those kinds of tax incentive economic development programs out into North and South Memphis. So the Binghamton development a couple years ago and Whitehaven, and there was this concerted effort that seemed like, and I don't know if either of you want to take this, more than in the past were these economic development programs happening in outside the core. I'm not saying that he did that cynically just for votes, but there was a presence of the mayor's office and economic development activity over the last couple of years in again, Whitehaven and Raleigh and Binghamton that hadn't been there in past years. And they kind of sort of shied away a little bit from some of the big ticket flashy projects, like FedEx coming downtown or ServiceMaster or so on. Is that kind of what you mean by being mayor, or are you talking about other things?
Well, no, I really was just talking about the power of the incumbency in terms of, if someone is having a gala or something over here and you're looking for a speaker, you have the mayor, and so you go there. You don't necessarily go and you campaign on this, that, and the other, but your presence makes a difference. But back on what you're saying there, that, I think that, I give Strickland the benefit of a doubt in terms of the different programs and things that he put forth, and a number of the people in his administration are sound people in terms of their positions on those types of things. But the issue though is still, having done that, and then you got the big development going downtown, there's still a wide swath of people that are just not really feeling that economic progress, and that to some degree played out in the race, but the majority of the people saw it the way that Mr. Strickland did and said, hey, let's keep rolling.
And I think that the one thing that the mayor was very careful to do, and he did it a lot, was that when there was a big announcement, he almost always said, look, we want to spread this to other areas. We know that other areas are in need, other areas deserve to see this kind of progress. He never went out there and said, yeah, this is working, we're doing it, we don't need to change anything. He always talked about something that I think some of the internal polling among the campaigns might have shown, and that is that people were satisfied with the direction of the city, but they didn't think the city was where it needed to be.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that you have to wonder, well, was there a level of dissatisfaction, but they just didn't see the candidates to make a change, you know? And I think that's a big issue when you look at Mr. Strickland, and then you look at Mr. Harrington and Sawyer. It's like, okay, obviously they just did not see a big enough of a reason to switch gears there.
Well, in the case of Harrington, in terms of what the candidates actually stood for and what they actually supported, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between Harrington and Strickland. I mean, the main difference was that Mayor Harrington thought that he was the person who could best carry out these changes, but he was for a bigger police force. He was for the use of incentives to some degree in general. So I just didn't see a lot of difference in their platforms.
Yeah, well, one of the big differences is that Strickland was in the position of really going positive about the things, you know, hey, this is my record. And then Harrington's going, yeah, but, or no. And I just think that didn't play.
Yeah, the tone, I mean, I would say my own sort of observation was that Harrington's tone was much more negative about the problems in Memphis, and this mayor's not getting it done. This Mayor Strickland's not getting done. Strickland, I mean, he was on the show a month ago. His message was constantly, we have momentum. I mean, he said it as many times as I could possibly count. And he said, yeah, we have all these problems and we're not good enough. But he tried to lay out a more optimistic path.
Sure,
right?
You have to be negative to some degree when you're challenging the incumbent, but you got to balance that with some picture that you're painting that makes people say, yes, that's the world that I want to live in right now. And the whole let's do it again world just wasn't one that people were willing to take residency in. I
think it was interesting to talk about Tammy Sawyer. I mean, I was surprised you were not about where her turnout was. And what I would hear from people who were very enthusiastic about her and her message and the progressive liberal message and this focus on poverty and inequality, even people who were huge fans of that message and huge fans of hers. I had many people say to me, I'm not hearing how she's going to get us there. I'm hearing all this rhetoric and all these things that I want to have happen, they would say to me. I want there to be more focus on poverty and inequality and race and sexism and all these, but she's not really laying out plans that I can get around, that I can sort of identify that will address those. And I mean, I had any number of people say, yeah, but the mayor's office can't solve, issues of regional poverty. I mean, the mayor can only do so much. And again, that may just be the people I heard from, but I heard it again and again and again that people who really loved her message but didn't hear the tangible steps, right or wrong, they just didn't hear the tangible steps that she was going to take to get those things accomplished.
I thought that to some degree that her vote totals were a kind of referendum or verdict on the new activism that she represented. And I think that what is the case with any movement is that these kind of movements, these kind of directions are rarely start out as a majority of the people, that it's usually a very small group of people and it takes time to build. Tammy Sawyer's trajectory has taken place over a relatively short amount of time.
It's a very
about
good
a
point.
5-year period. Yeah. And I think that the new activism remains relevant, but I don't think that you've seen it catch on to a larger degree at this point.
Yeah, and I can't imagine, and if anything I said sounded otherwise, that this is the end of Tammy Sawyer's career because, people lose. Bill Clinton lost one of his first races. I mean, people lose elections, but she's still a county commissioner, and she has risen very quickly and has a very avid following, and that again, I think what you're saying about the activist community is very relevant. We will reach out, I think we may have already, to try to get Mayor Strickland on as soon as reasonable to talk about his goals and plans and what's next in the coming term, in his second term. And we may come back to some of that, but let's move to the other big vote that happened on Thursday, and that was the sales tax referendum. And Bill, for those who maybe voted but didn't fully understand, again, remind us what that sales tax referendum said, and now we're going to talk about the muddiness of what happens after it has passed.
It is a 0.5% increase in the sales tax, taking it up to 9.75% on most items that you buy. There's been some rollbacks in the legislature, but this is most of the things you buy. The sales tax you pay goes up to 9.75%. That money is intended to, by the terms of the referendum, to restore the benefits that the city cut 5 years ago to all city employees, to restore those health and pension benefits to police and firefighters only. If there is any money left over in terms of the revenue generated by this 0.5 cent, then that would go toward the pre-kindergarten expansion that's underway by the city and the county, and it will also go to fix the roads.
And it was a close vote. It was 49,000 in for, 44,000 against. The unions, police and fire, worked very hard to get to get it on the ballot in the first place. They had 140,000 signatures. They'd been pushing the mayor's office, pushing the city council to do this quarter-point sales tax increase to fund these benefit increases. The council and so on had not done it. And most of the time, you sort of think that a sales tax increase will fail, but the unions worked the crowd. I mean, they worked really hard on this. They had big turnout. What comes next from it is extremely muddy in terms of that increase. The Shelby County Commission can vote to take half of that increase, and it's estimated to raise something, there are differences of opinion, but let's call it $50 million-ish at current rates, and that can go up and down based on the economy, but based on current rates. The County Commission has the legal right to vote to take half of it, and Edmund Ford Jr. from the County Commission has said he would like for them to do that. So that takes that $50 million down to $25 million. And even more complicated is that it's not clear that the City Council is bound by the vote to put that money towards benefits. What happens next?
Well, they're probably going to have a contest to see if everybody can recount what you just said.
But it's that complicated. It's even more complicated.
Yeah, but it was a close vote. But when I was listening to people going up to it, I didn't hear a lot of strong sentiments about it one way or the other, unless I was in a particular pocket of people. So the vote itself didn't surprise me so much. I can't imagine the city council deciding that it would do something other than what was designated for those funds. That would be a disaster, I think. I think what will be interesting to me is what is the county commission going to do in terms of going for its share and how all that's going to work itself out. But the sales tax, I mean, it was a hard decision for some people, though. I mean, this is Memphis. We're poverty laden. Salaries aren't what they need to be, and we're talking about raising the sales tax. That was a tough deal. But then when you tie it to the whole safety issue, that was the lever changer for some people. Although there's a real argument, still as to more police, crime ratio.
Yeah. Bill, your thoughts on the sales tax?
I think that what you saw happen was reflected people's concerns about crime, their ongoing concerns about crime. You also really didn't have an organized and sustained campaign against a sales tax hike. You had Kemp Conrad on the city council and Edmund Ford Jr. on the county commission who were vocally against it, but
some of the few who were vocally elected politicians who were vocally against it.
Most of the other elected officials had a live and let live attitude. I'm not going to come out and campaign for it, but whatever the people do, I will support that and follow that. Meanwhile, the police and fire unions got into this in a big way. They ran a traditional campaign with ward and precinct work, mobilizing voters, and it showed in the vote total that just about the easiest thing to push off a cliff politically is a tax hike that's on the ballot. And we've seen it happen before. I mean, we actually counted up the number of ballot questions that have been on any kind of local ballot in the last decade. There have been 56 ballot questions, including this one. 11 of them, including the one last night, have been approved by voters. 11 of them have been approved by voters. The rest have failed, including in 2012, 2 sales tax hike proposals for universal pre-kindergarten and a gas tax proposal to fund the Memphis Area Transit Authority.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, and I think you both have said, and I mean, my sense of it was, for what it's worth, was that it was the crime issue, and that the crime issue, one, the union organization and the union Get Out the Vote and the mailers, and they ran it like a campaign. So there was that, both the fire union and the police union. But the second thing was people, responding to crime. Memphis has a crime problem. Most of the candidates talk about it. They talk about different solutions. But even Mayor Strickland, who won overwhelmingly, ran on, hey, we need more fire and police. We need more fire and police. And he also, I think his stance on this was, I will go, if it passes, I'll go with the will of the voters. Right? He did not come out against it.
He decided not to take a position on it. And so he didn't. But the other thing that the unions did was they really linked up with Strickland's sentiment that we need to have more police officers, and they said that this is a way to not only get more police officers but to keep them. That
you articulated what I was fumbling to say, which was that there was a kind of a very, very smart strategic way in hindsight, the way they capitalized on the mayor's popularity. The mayor constantly talking about building the police force, a question that needs a lot of exploration. As you said, more cops equal. But the general sentiment seemed to be out there of Strickland voters. Yeah, I want more cops. I want more cops. Strickland goes everywhere and talks about rebuilding the police force. I'm looking at the ballot and, here's a quarter point. Doesn't seem like a lot to increase the amount of fire. Everybody loves firemen, and no one likes crime. And it was an interesting way to passively kind of latch on to Strickland's rhetoric and campaign positions on rebuilding the police force.
I'm going to plead lack of sleep on this.
Did you say something? Did you have an error?
I think I did.
You are allowed. This is the third error in the 9.5-year history of Behind the Headlines. So go ahead, tell us.
I'm going to say that there were 56 referendums in the last decade, and I believe that 10 of those passed.
Not 11?
No, I'm going to say I'm not sure. I'm going to
10
leave
or
this
11. Yeah, all right. We'll go on Twitter
It was
afterward and
kind
we'll
of a
correct
long
it.
night.
We'll correct it.
Yeah.
It was a long day and a long night and a long week, really. Other thoughts on the other dynamic I think that is interesting, and Kemp Conrad, when he was on the show a couple weeks ago, arguing vociferously, to say the least, with Tommy Malone, arguing against the sales tax increases. No one knows what's going to happen with the state. That could the state come in if the whole reason folks like Kemp Conrad will say that they end up cutting the benefits back in 2014 is the state had said, all municipalities, Memphis particularly, but other municipalities, need to get serious about funding your pension and your health benefits for retirees. That's why the council argued they needed to cut the benefits and start putting more money into those funds. Now with this on the horizon, I mean, it's a legislature that does not hesitate to impose conditions on cities like Memphis, right? I mean, but there's so much, as you said, there's so much more. This is not so simple as it's going to pass, the money's going to go in the bank, and it's absolutely going to go. I don't think it is, that it's absolutely going to go to fire and police the way they expect. I just think there are a lot of hurdles before it gets done.
Yeah, I have no idea what the legislature is going to do. We do have a new governor there, and what his position is and whether he can hold a sway with the legislators in any kind of way to affect this would be the X factor.
The comptroller's office has had a lot to say about how the city maintains its pension, and that's the reason we have a state law requiring them to fully fund some parts of this arrangement. So there will probably be some revenue estimates that I think the state is going to want to look at if this actually goes on the books and gets in the budget.
Let us shift for the last third of the show here to city council races. Bill, where do you want to start?
All 13 seats were on the ballot. 7 of the 10 incumbents running were elected to new terms of office last night. Jerry Curry, who was one of 3 appointed council members who decided to not run for the District 6 seat she holds, but for Super District 8 Position 1, lost that bid to J.B. Smiley, who just ran for the Shelby County Commission last year. He won that seat overwhelmingly. You have 2 other incumbents who will go to November runoffs. In District 1, it's Sherman Greer, who was appointed to that seat, against Rhonda Logan, who was one of the people vying for that appointment in January by the City Council to fill a vacancy. The other is going to be in District 7. This was the largest council race on the ballot. The incumbent, Berlin Boyd, goes to a runoff with challenger Michaelyn Easter Thomas.
That was the one that surprised me maybe the most of all the runoffs, that Berlin Boyd, he had more votes than Michaelyn, but didn't win that district handily, and he's been in office quite some time now. So were you surprised again?
One full term.
No, not at all, because you just look back at the stories and things that we've done over the last year or so, and Mr. Boyd was embroiled in a number of controversial type measures, both in terms of things that directly affecting the council and even some of his connectivity outside. So, and then the big blow up in the city council where we're going to the whole Dozens deal. I mean, no, it doesn't surprise me at all.
What was the whole Dozens deal again?
There was a flare up, and he actually said something about one of the other people's.
He made a comment about someone's mother. In the audience. I rarely,
I do remember that.
I don't think I've ever actually said that before, but yes, he talked about someone's mother.
So I'm saying that there was just enough out there that it didn't surprise me that there would be a number of people to get out and try to challenge him. I think the thing that maybe surprised me, though, was District 6, and that's the one where Ed Ford Sr. won by such a large margin.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to, I was telling you guys before the show, to do a couple of forums there, and in most of those instances you had, he wasn't at either one of them, right? And the people that were there were just so, they weren't anti-him as they were anti-quote the Ford family, and this district has been held hostage for all these number of years.
Since 1972.
Yeah.
And this district is where, for those of us who don't know the district numbers, how they relate to neighborhoods.
It's basically South Memphis, 38106, 38126 are all in that area, right? And so then to see the numbers come out that large were somewhat surprising to me, and it says that and at least in that particular district, they still got the mechanisms to get the vote out and get people to.
The council race that surprised me the most was Super District 9, Position 2, Chase Carlisle and Erica Sugarman. That in the unofficial results, Carlisle won that race by 531 votes.
Out of what, some 80, 60, how many thousands voted?
Out of, let me.
You're not going to do it off memory.
Yeah, I'm not going to step in.
Of many. I mean, like the Berlin Boyd, the Boyd Easter Thomas vote was, sort of 2,500 to 22. I mean, it was really small numbers, but that I guess because it was a super district.
It's out of 44,562 votes that we're talking about, and the lead changed hands several times during the vote count. Erica Sugarman ran in a special election for another council seat just last year, and in effect kept on campaigning and campaigned very hard. Chase Carlisle is the vice president with Avison Young. This was his first campaign, and it was surprising that it was this close.
Yeah, Sugarman has strong name recognition from family.
Yeah. Will there be a recount triggered when it's that close?
No, our state law is that you don't get an automatic recount if it's that close. It would be closer than that if there were that kind of a law.
And the runoffs will happen when? What's the process on the runoffs?
The runoffs will happen in the first week in November. I don't know the exact date, but November people will go back to the polls in these 2 districts only.
Those
the
2
turnout
districts
will be extremely small.
So, I mean, any sense? I mean, let's talk about who won't be for a second. Who won't be on the city council? Kim Conrad, been a fixture on the city council twice, a current chairman. Reed Hedgepeth. Who else?
Joe Brown.
Joe Brown, of course.
All three of them were term limited, and we should mention Joe Brown made a bid for city court clerk.
Indeed.
He came in second to former City Council member Myron Lowry.
Yeah. Who else comes to mind in terms of council people who are termed out? Is that we're leaving some people out, and we're going to get
Those
we're gonna
were
get hate mail
those
for it,
were
but
the three. Who
those are
were,
the three
who
who've
were
been
term
very
limited.
prominent and been okay. So your sense of we've got the same mayor for another 4-year term, and we've got a council that will turn over. When will the new people be seated?
January 1st.
Okay.
Everybody starts their new terms of office. Between now and then, maybe a little bit after that, you might see some changes in the mayor's administration. You might see some shuffling of division directors. You will probably see a lot of division directors who stay in
Yeah.
the second term.
Yeah. Other thoughts of what I mean, how the mayor works with this new council? Do you have any feel, Karanji, yet of how this council will look and feel and operate, or is it just too soon?
It's too soon for me, but I think that the main thing that I'm looking for is a little bit outside of the main politics, and I'm just to the degree that there's an organized African American community. I'm wondering, where do they go from here? I mean, where do we go from here relative to politics? And there are just a number of things that are in the play that may be a factor as where do we go from here.
And a quick thing, Bill, with the back to the sales tax referendum, what is the timing on that? When does that go into effect? Do we know?
The council takes this up during their budget season, which will start in the spring.
Okay, and then the
So-
county commission around that same time could vote.
The
to take
county
50%
commission would decide whether they want to try to preempt it earlier than that.
earlier than that. Okay, thank you both for being here, and thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.